The heat of the twin suns beat down on Livia as she surveyed the wreckage of her ship. It had been a routine mission, or at least, it was supposed to be. The unexpected asteroid collision had thrown her off course, and now here she was, stranded on an uncharted, desolate planet with limited supplies and no way to call for help. She took in a sharp breath, her visor fogging from the sweat on her brow. The wreckage of her ship was scattered across a barren landscape, the red sand beneath her feet stretching as far as the eye could see. Her comms were down, and the only company she had were the sounds of the wind whipping through the dry landscape. Livia had been trained for situations like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight that greeted her when she stumbled across the alien. His body was unlike anything she had ever seen. Standing at over 7 feet tall, with sharp ridges along his jawline and glowing violet eyes, he looked every bit the monster the stories described. At first, Livia didn't know what to make of him. His limbs were strong and his movements were deliberate as though he had known the desert for centuries. She instinctively reached for the blaster at her side, but something in his demeanor stopped her. There was no hostility in his posture. In fact, there was something almost peaceful about him. "Are you real?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She had read about alien species, but this one was unlike any other. He watched her quietly, never moving, until finally he spoke in a language she didn't understand. Her instincts screamed for her to pull the trigger, but something in his tone, something ancient and sorrowful, kept her frozen in place. "You alone?" The alien's voice was deep, resonating with an unsettling power. Livia blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. This alien, could it speak in her language? The fact that he could communicate meant he wasn't entirely hostile, right? But why had he been out here in this wasteland alone? Suddenly, her training kicked in. She wasn't sure whether this was some sort of test or if this alien was dangerous, but one thing was clear. He was the only thing she could turn to for help. She dropped her hand from the blaster and took a step forward. "Yes," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm stranded here. I need help." The alien didn't respond immediately. He merely watched her for a long moment, his violet eyes searching her face for something she couldn't understand. "Not safe here," he finally said, his voice low and almost sad. "I can help you." And so the unlikely alliance began. Days turned into weeks as Livia and Kor struggled to survive on the desolate planet. The heat from the twin suns was relentless, and the winds often picked up into dust storms that obliterated any trace of their previous paths. But as the harsh conditions of the planet wore on, something unexpected began to grow between them. Livia found herself opening up to Kor, a being from a world so distant that even the stars seemed closer. Kor's words were often cryptic, but his actions spoke volumes. Despite his intimidating appearance, Kor's gestures were gentle, his voice always calm. He had saved her more than once during their early days, using his alien technology to purify water and create shelter from the storm. As they moved deeper into the heart of the planet, Kor led her to an ancient alien structure, a colossal, crumbling temple buried in the sand. The structure's design was unlike anything Livia had ever seen. It was as if the architecture itself was alive, organic in nature, with walls that pulsed faintly with an eerie light. "This is where I come from," Kor said quietly, his voice reverberating through the darkened halls. "My people once thrived here before they cast me away." Livia stepped forward cautiously, her fingers tracing the symbols that ran along the walls. They glowed faintly beneath her touch, filling the air with a hum that seemed to resonate in her bones. "Why did they exile you?" she asked softly, her curiosity piqued. She had heard stories of alien species waging war across galaxies, but Kor didn't seem like a warrior. He was too calm, too measured. "They feared what I could become," Kor replied, his voice distant, as though he were remembering something painful. "I was different, an anomaly in the genetic makeup of my people. The orb you see in the center of this structure, it's a symbol of their fear. They believed I was destined to bring ruin." Livia stepped closer to the orb that sat at the heart of the structure. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, responding to her presence. It was beautiful, its surface shimmering like liquid glass, shifting in hues of blue, green, and gold. "What is it?" she asked, mesmerized by its allure. Kor's eyes softened, the pain of his past visible in their violet depths. "It is the key to my exile. My people believed that by controlling the orb, they could prevent me from fulfilling the prophecy they feared. But instead, it bonded with me, making me stronger than they could ever imagine. It is both my curse and my salvation. Livia's mind spun with the new information. She had no way of knowing how much of Kor's story was true, but there was no denying the raw emotion in his voice. She felt a growing empathy for him. She was beginning to realize that Kor wasn't a threat to be feared. He was someone who had been misunderstood, abandoned by his people just as she had been abandoned by her mission. She glanced back at Kor. "We're both outcasts here, aren't we?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but unlike you, I have nowhere to return. My exile is permanent." Livia didn't know what to say to that. The weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. She had come to this planet as a scientist, as someone driven by the mission to explore the unknown. But now, after spending so much time with Kor, she realized that survival was about more than just science. It was about finding a reason to keep going in the face of isolation, a reason to trust in someone who was nothing like you. "Maybe we don't need to go back," Livia said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Maybe this is our chance to start something new, together." Kor's violet eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. "Together." Livia smiled slightly. "We've been alone for so long, both of us. We could create something better here. You don't have to be alone anymore." For the first time, Kor's expression softened, and Livia saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. Hope. A glimmer of hope in the midst of a universe that had rejected them both. "We could try," Kor said, his voice barely above a whisper. Just as they shared this quiet, unspoken bond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The faint hum that had been emanating from the orb grew louder, more urgent. A deep, resonating pulse vibrated through the temple, shaking the walls. Livia stumbled backward, her eyes wide with alarm. "What's happening?" Kor's expression hardened. "Someone is trying to take the orb." Before she could ask him more, the sound of distant engines reached their ears, growing louder with every passing second. Kor's body stiffened, and Livia instinctively reached for her communicator, only to realize it had been damaged in the crash. "They're coming," Kor said, his voice cold with resolve. "We need to leave now." Livia's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced toward the entrance of the temple. The low hum of engines grew louder, and shadows began to appear on the horizon. It was the first sign of life they had encountered since the crash, but Livia wasn't sure whether that was a blessing or a curse. Kor's hand shot out to grasp hers, his grip firm and reassuring. "Stay close. Whatever happens, we stick together." The terror that had gripped Livia on her first days on the planet was beginning to fade, replaced by something else. It wasn't hope, at least not entirely. But it was something that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. She wasn't alone anymore, and whatever came next, she knew she'd face it with Kor by her side. As the engines roared closer, she glanced up at him, her voice steady despite the growing danger. "We'll fight them together." Kor nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We fight, but we do not lose." Livia and Kor's desperate escape from the alien raiders led them to an unexpected turn of events. The arrival of a human rescue ship, just in time to prevent their capture. The military, having been alerted to their location, arrived at the temple with high-tech gear and armed forces. However, the sight of Kor, who had never fully trusted any humans, filled him with both wariness and curiosity. As they boarded the rescue ship, the gravity of their situation became even more apparent. The mission that had once been focused on Livia's survival now turned into something entirely different, something much more complicated. They weren't just dealing with the alien raiders anymore. They were heading back to Earth, where Kor would be treated like a prisoner, not a companion. The ship's interior was stark and clinical, its sterile walls reflecting the cold efficiency of its crew. The rescue team was polite, but their eyes kept darting to Kor. Livia noticed their unease. Despite her clear defense of Kor, it was obvious to her that they saw him as a threat, an unspoken reminder that the universe wasn't ready to accept such a being, let alone trust him. The ride back to Earth was tense. Kor sat by the viewport, his large form dwarfing the seat. His glowing violet eyes reflected the stars, and Livia could sense that he was still unsure of what lay ahead. For a brief moment, she saw vulnerability in him. His alien nature, once an advantage, now seemed like a curse in the face of humanity's fear. "How long will it take?" Kor asked, his voice low. His alien accent was still thick, and Livia couldn't help but notice the edge of uncertainty in his tone. "About 2 days," Livia replied, her voice steady. "We're going to Earth. It'll be okay. I'll be with you the entire time." She wasn't sure who she was trying to reassure, Kor or herself. Their bond had grown deeper than she expected, but so had the complexity of their situation. Earth wasn't going to welcome Core. She was sure of it. Upon their arrival, Livia and Core were immediately taken to a secure facility near Earth's Central Command. There, they met Dr. Eldrin, a scientist who had been following Livia's mission from the beginning. Dr. Eldrin had studied alien life forms for years and had always advocated for peaceful interaction. Despite his reputation as an academic, he seemed genuinely sympathetic to Core's plight. Livia noticed Dr. Eldrin's kindness immediately, but she also saw the fear in his eyes. He was a man of reason, but the government's stance was clear. Core was a threat, an anomaly that couldn't be left unchecked. Earth's leaders were already debating what to do with him. "Livia, I wish I could promise you that everything will be fine, but—" Dr. Eldrin trailed off, glancing over at Core, who stood silently in the corner of the room, staring at the security cameras that monitored every inch of the facility. "They won't let him go, will they?" Livia asked, her voice quiet but firm. "No," Dr. Eldrin replied, his voice full of regret. "There's too much fear. The public doesn't trust him. It doesn't matter that he helped you survive. The fact that he's an alien, an unknown entity, terrifies people." Livia's heart sank. She had hoped for more, hoped that somehow the world would see Core as she did, not as a monster, but as a sentient being with feelings, fears, and hopes. But in the eyes of the public, Core wasn't a person. He was a weapon, a risk, a threat. The next morning, Captain Alara, the head of the Earth's military operations, arrived to speak with Livia. The moment Livia saw her, she knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. Alara was all business, her uniform sharp and impeccably pressed. Her icy blue eyes were calculating, never betraying an ounce of emotion. "You should understand," Captain Alara began, "that this situation is more than just your personal attachment to the alien. We're talking about the security of Earth, of humanity. We don't know what Core's presence here means or what his race is capable of. He could be a spy, a saboteur. We have to be cautious." Livia's patience thinned as she listened. She had heard this speech too many times before. When someone feared the unknown, they clung to their prejudices. "He saved my life," Livia said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of frustration. "He's not a threat. You have no reason to be afraid of him." Alara's eyes narrowed. "Your opinion doesn't matter, Livia. You're emotionally involved. That clouds your judgment." Livia took a deep breath. "I'm not the only one who sees the truth here. You think this is about fear, Captain, but it's not. This is about understanding, about learning to live with those who are different even if they come from somewhere else." Captain Alara crossed her arms, looking skeptical. "We're not dealing with simple cultural differences here, Livia. This is about the survival of humanity. We cannot risk letting an alien race come to Earth unless we know everything about them." Livia's eyes burned with determination. "And how can we learn if we keep pushing them away, if we keep isolating them?" A long silence hung in the room. Livia's words lingered in the air, but Captain Alara remained unmoved. "Don't expect me to change my mind," Alara said coldly, her eyes fixed on Livia. "If you want to keep him alive, you'll have to prove that he's not a threat. But trust me, the military is prepared for any outcome." Livia left the conversation feeling conflicted. She couldn't help but feel that the captain's words were the beginning of something even darker. Earth wasn't ready for Core. They weren't ready for him in the way that mattered. They saw him as an enemy, and they weren't going to stop until he was either controlled or destroyed. But Livia wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The days dragged on as Livia worked with Dr. Eldrin, hoping to find some way to prove Core's worth to the world. Meanwhile, Core remained in isolation, a prisoner to his alien nature. In the midst of all the political pressure, the endless meetings, and the rising tension, Livia made a decision. She couldn't just stand by and let Core be treated like a lab animal. She would do whatever it took to show the world that he was more than just an alien. He was a person, and she loved him. Livia's mission had started as a simple exploration. Now, it had become a fight for the very soul of humanity. The days since their return to Earth had been a blur of briefings, interrogations, and sleepless nights. Livia couldn't shake the feeling of being caught in a storm, unable to steer the ship. Every decision she made seemed to push her further into a corner, and every time she tried to explain Core's humanity, it felt like the walls grew taller. Core, confined to a secure, heavily monitored room within the research facility, had become increasingly agitated. The alien's patience, once steady and calm, was now cracking under the weight of the situation. He had no idea how to navigate the political complexities of Earth. He had trusted Livia, but even she seemed powerless in the face of the mounting pressure from the military and government. "Why are they doing this?" Kor's voice echoed through the communication speaker, a hint of desperation seeping into his words. Livia sat at a table in the research facility's quiet observation room, her fingers tracing the edge of the glass. She'd grown fond of the steady rhythm of the room, the hum of machinery, the clicking of keyboards, and the occasional murmurs of scientists discussing data. But none of it offered solace. She couldn't stop thinking about Kor's isolation, his fear, and the oppressive force of Earth's military and governmental systems. She pressed a button, and the screen flickered to life, showing Kor standing by the glass partition in his secure room, staring out at her. "I don't know, Kor," she said softly, her voice laced with frustration. "I've been trying to make them understand, but they're so set in their ways. They don't see you as a person, they only see an alien, a threat." Kor's glowing violet eyes narrowed slightly, his features hardening. "You told me humans were different, that they could understand. I trusted you." Livia's heart sank. She had never intended to break that trust, but the situation was slipping further from her control with each passing day. "I didn't think it would be like this," she whispered, looking away, ashamed of her own helplessness. Meanwhile, Dr. Eldrin continued his work in the background, gathering evidence of Kor's peaceful nature and his role in Livia's survival on the alien planet. Dr. Eldrin had been the one to first suggest that Kor could be used as a resource for understanding alien technology, an unprecedented opportunity for humanity to expand its knowledge beyond the stars. But with the government's increasing pressure, even he felt his hopes for peaceful coexistence growing dim. Dr. Eldrin had arranged a meeting with President Grayson, who had the final say in the matter of Kor's fate. It was a tense meeting, one that Livia had been summoned to attend, knowing that this decision could change everything. As Livia stepped into the high-security conference room, she was greeted by a somber President Grayson, a man who looked like the weight of the universe was on his shoulders. His graying hair, sharp features, and military-style suit gave him the air of someone who had made tough decisions before. But this was different. This was a question of whether humanity could learn to coexist with something entirely foreign, and Grayson wasn't sure if he was ready to take that leap. "I assume you know why we're here, Captain Delane," President Grayson said, his voice deep and formal. "The situation with Kor has reached a breaking point. The public's fear is growing. The military's stance has hardened. We need a solution, and soon." Livia stood straighter, trying to steady her nerves. "I've tried to explain that Kor is no threat to Earth," she said firmly. "He saved my life. He's proven his worth. But we're not just talking about a person. We're talking about a being who can offer us insights into alien technology, culture, and possibly even science we've never dreamed of. We can't just discard that opportunity." President Grayson's gaze shifted to the holographic screen that displayed Kor's image. He studied it for a long moment, weighing the implications of the decision. "He's a wild card," Grayson said finally, his voice low. "We don't know what he's capable of, what his people are capable of. The orb he's tied to could be dangerous. We can't allow ourselves to be lulled into complacency just because he helped one human survive." "Please," Livia's voice broke through, sharp and pleading. "Don't you see? Kor isn't like what you think. He's been exiled. He's been treated like an outcast by his own people. All he wants is a chance to prove he's more than just a threat. He's been trying to make his home here. You can't take that away from him." President Grayson's lips tightened, his eyes scanning the room. He looked torn. He wasn't the type of leader to make rash decisions, but the political pressure was unbearable. He had to consider the greater good of Earth, even if it meant sacrificing one individual's well-being. "Captain, I respect your judgment," President Grayson said, finally looking at her. "But we need to think about the long-term implications. If we allow Kor to stay on Earth, it could set a precedent, one that could open doors for more alien species. It could change everything." Livia felt her stomach twist into knots. She knew what was coming. "And what do you propose we do, Mr. President?" she asked, her voice growing cold. "We're putting Kor in containment," Grayson said, his tone final. "We can't risk allowing him to roam free, but we're not going to destroy him either. We'll conduct further studies. If he's as peaceful as you claim, we'll try to integrate him into our research projects. But it's a calculated risk." Livia's world seemed to collapse in that moment. She had hoped for a more humane solution, but this was worse than she had imagined. Kor would be treated like an experiment, like a curiosity, a being of incredible potential reduced to a specimen in a cage. Later that night, Livia found herself standing in front of Kor's cell, her hand pressed against the glass. He stood on the other side, his eyes watching her, as if silently asking for an explanation. "I couldn't stop it," she whispered, her throat tight. "I tried, Kor, I really tried." Kor's expression remained unreadable, but he tilted his head slightly, as though contemplating her words. "You did what you could, Livia," he said finally. "The universe is full of beings who will never understand me, but perhaps that doesn't matter. I found something here that I never expected, and for that I am grateful." Tears welled up in Livia's eyes. She couldn't speak. She couldn't say anything that would make this situation right. She had failed him. But Kor wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. "We may be separated for now," Kor continued, his voice soft yet steady. "But I have learned that the connection we share is stronger than any barrier. Don't give up hope. Even in isolation, there is strength." Livia wiped away a tear, nodding, determined. She wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Kor had saved her life, and she would fight to give him a life worth living. It had been weeks since the decision was made to place Kor in containment. The days blurred together for Livia. As much as she tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, every waking moment felt like a battle to ensure Kor's survival. The weight of the political pressure, the mounting public distrust, and the oppressive forces in the military made every moment a precarious one. Kor was not a guest. He was a prisoner. And the more Livia thought about it, the more that reality gnawed at her soul. Every day she visited him in his holding cell. It had become a routine, one she desperately clung to. The thick glass that separated them was a constant reminder of their struggles, but their bond had not been broken. In fact, it had only grown stronger over time. Kor had adapted to the sterile environment, though the frustration in his eyes never fully faded. His alien nature made it impossible for him to fit in. He was too different, too strange, too misunderstood. But Livia knew the truth. Kor wasn't just an alien, he was a person, and he had proven time and again that he could be trusted. One evening, as she arrived at the containment facility, Livia was met with an unexpected sight. Captain Alara standing in front of the observation window, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on Kor's cell. Livia frowned. "Captain Alara, what are you doing here?" Alara turned, her expression unreadable. "I've been ordered to oversee the continued monitoring of Kor. The situation is escalating. More and more people are demanding answers. They're afraid, Delane." Livia's heart sank. She had known it wouldn't be long before this political game reached a boiling point. The public was becoming more vocal in their demands, the media spreading fear about Kor's presence on Earth. The military's containment efforts were becoming more visible to the world, and the pressure on President Grayson was intensifying. "He's not a threat," Livia said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "He's never been a threat. I've seen his heart, Captain. He wants peace." "I'm not here to argue with you," Alara responded, her voice colder than Livia had ever heard it. "I've read the reports, the data. Kor may not have done anything to hurt anyone, but he's still an unknown. The government's stance has been clear from the beginning. Keep him contained until we have answers." Livia felt a surge of anger, but she held it back. "We have answers. We have proof that he's peaceful. He saved my life. He saved countless others on his own planet. Why can't you see that?" Alara hesitated. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed over her features. "I see it, Livia. I just can't ignore the facts. There's too much risk." Livia was about to reply when the door to the observation room opened, and Dr. Eldrin stepped inside, his face drawn with concern. "The situation is more urgent than you realize," Dr. Eldrin said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "The president has made his decision. He's ordered Kor's immediate relocation to a more secure facility. The military is increasing the pressure, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep Kor contained." Livia's stomach dropped. She had feared this day would come, but hearing it from Dr. Eldrin's lips made it all too real. Kor was about to be moved, probably to a far more isolated and guarded facility where he would be nothing more than an experiment. "Where are they taking him?" Livia demanded, her voice rising. "They haven't said yet," Dr. Eldrin replied, "but it won't be good for him. We've been given very little time to act." Livia didn't think twice. She knew that she had to do something, anything, to get Kor out of this situation. If she didn't act, the alien would become nothing more than a scientific curiosity, locked away from the world forever. She couldn't allow that to happen. She couldn't allow Core to be treated as an object to be studied and dissected. "Livia, you need to think this through," Dr. Eldrin warned. "If you try to break him out, there will be consequences. The military will hunt you both down. There's no going back." "I don't care," Livia replied firmly. "He's not just an alien, he's my friend, he's my partner, and I'm not going to let them take him from me." Captain Alara, who had been silently watching the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "You're making a mistake. You're not just risking Core's life, you're risking your own. Do you really want to go down this path?" Livia turned toward her, her expression resolute. "I don't have a choice anymore. This isn't just about Core. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. One that fears the unknown, or one that has the courage to understand it." Captain Alara looked at her for a long moment. Then, to Livia's surprise, she stepped forward. "You're right," Alara said quietly. "I can't promise that I'll help you, but I won't stand in your way either. If you're going to do this, you'll need all the help you can get." Livia's heart raced. She hadn't expected this. Captain Alara, the one person who had been so steadfast in her opposition, was now offering her support. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With the clock ticking down, Livia, Dr. Eldrin, and Captain Alara made their plans. They would have to be quick, precise, and silent. The military would be on high alert, but they had one advantage. Livia knew Core better than anyone. She knew how to communicate with him, how to move through the security systems, and how to get him out before it was too late. That night, under the cover of darkness, they made their move. Livia slipped into the facility's control room, bypassing security with the help of Dr. Eldrin's inside knowledge. Alara kept watch, ensuring no one suspected their actions. As the final locks on Core's containment chamber were overridden, Livia's heart hammered in her chest. When the door slid open, Core stood there, waiting. His alien form, tall and imposing, was bathed in the pale light of the facility. His violet eyes met Livia's, full of trust and silent gratitude. "Are you ready?" Livia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Core nodded. "I've been ready for this." With a final glance toward Alara and Dr. Eldrin, Livia stepped forward, extending her hand to Core. Together they would escape. Together they would find a new life. The path ahead was uncertain. There were dangers, both from those who would never accept their bond and from the unknown future that awaited them. But as Livia clasped Core's hand, she knew that they were no longer just two beings from different worlds. They were a family that would fight to be free.